Right. So you've got this world you're building in your head, right? This story that you're like itching to tell.
Yeah.
And chances are, if you're like listening to this and you're into D&D, you probably already have a character in mind.
You probably do, yeah.
Like that's the first thing you think of, probably, right?
Absolutely.
It's that character that you're going to play in this world that you're making. And if you're like me, you kind of want to get going right away. You want to understand how to make this character like as soon as possible without getting bogged down in the details.
For sure.
And that's exactly what we're doing today for you today.
That's right. We're starting right at the very beginning, making your very own Dungeons & Dragons character. And, you've shared with us the basic rules for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition from D&D Beyond, so we're going to be taking a deep dive into that. But specifically, we're really focusing in on character creation, that initial super important step. We're going to give you the knowledge and the know-how to get started.
Yeah, and our goal with this is really straightforward. It's to give you a very clear idea of how to craft a D&D character, how to take those first steps. And we're going to be talking about the biggest choices you'll make right out of the gate.
Yeah.
And why those choices are so important for all the adventures you'll have later. It's not just filling out a sheet. It's way more than that.
It is.
It's literally like building the foundation for your whole D&D experience. So like, you've got this blank character sheet in front of you.
Yeah.
Where do we actually even start?
Oh, well, the essence of your D&D character, it's this really cool mix. I mean, on the one hand, you've got the game statistics, the numbers that tell you what your character can do, right?
Yeah.
But then there's this whole other side, this role-playing element.
Yeah.
Their personality, their history, their quirks. All those things are what you bring to life using your imagination.
Yeah.
And, this character basically becomes you in the D&D world. It's like your avatar.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little.
Yeah.
So even before we get into the rules and stuff, it seems like there's this initial phase that's all about just thinking.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of adventurer are we going for here? What kind of hero are we thinking of playing? Do we want a brave warrior?
Right.
Or maybe someone more sneaky and stealthy? Or maybe, someone super devoted, someone with divine powers?
Yeah.
Or even someone who, controls magic with this, dramatic flair.
For sure.
Or, like you mentioned, maybe it's like a mix of all those things, something totally unexpected.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Often it all starts with just a small idea, something that really grabs you. Maybe you're drawn to those stories of tough dwarves or the mysterious elves, or maybe you just love the idea of playing a character who's incredibly strong and tough, like a fighter. Even just looking at D&D art can spark that initial idea,
Yeah.
The important thing at this stage is to choose a character that truly gets you excited, a character you really want to play.
You want to feel connected to this character from the very start.
Exactly.
Okay, now once we have that initial idea, where does all that information go? It can't all stay in our heads.
Right. That's where the character sheet comes in. It becomes your central hub for everything about your character.
Yeah.
Their abilities, their skills, their gear, their backstory, everything. You can use the official character sheet, or there are a bunch of digital tools for it, or even just a notebook. The key is having a designated spot to keep track of everything as you go.
Makes sense.
And to help illustrate all of this as we talk, we're going to be using the example of Bob, who's creating his dwarf character named Brunor.
Ah, yes. Brunor.
Yeah.
Our case study.
Exactly.
The best way possible.
He's our guy. So Bob's got this image of Brunor in his head.
Okay.
What's that very first concrete step he takes to bring Brunor from an idea to an actual character on the sheet?
Yeah, what's that first box we check off?
That first step is deciding on Brunor's race. In D&D, every character belongs to a race. They're intelligent, humanoid species. The most common ones that people play are dwarves, elves, halflings, and humans. And it's important to remember that a lot of these races have sub-races like mountain dwarf or wood elf, which each have their own little twists and special abilities.
Okay, so race isn't just about what Brunor looks like, right? It's actually doing something in the game.
Absolutely. Choosing a race is a big part of shaping your character's identity. It does determine their basic appearance, like are they going to be stocky with a beard like a dwarf or, graceful and agile like an elf? But more importantly, it gives them certain natural talents, things they're good at based on their culture and their ancestry.
Okay.
These are what we call racial traits.
Racial traits. Can you give me some examples of what those might be?
Sure. There's a whole variety. Like a dwarf might have dark vision, meaning they can see in the dark, which opens up a lot of possibilities, especially when exploring.
Right.
Or they might be naturally good at using certain weapons or tools, like elves with longbows. Some races are better at certain skills, like sneaking around or noticing things, and some even have minor magic abilities.
Ah, I see.
The cool thing is how these traits often work really well with certain character classes.
Yeah.
Take dark vision, for instance. It's not just a passive thing. It can really change how your character explores, especially underground, and that can shape the kinds of adventures they can go on.
It's like some races just naturally fit certain roles, like we mentioned before, the nimble, sneaky Lightfoot halflings.
Yeah?
They often make great rogues because they're already good at being stealthy.
Right. Exactly.
And the studious high elves, they often gravitate towards becoming wizards.
Yeah, it's almost like they have a natural affinity for magic. But, it's worth remembering that those aren't hard limits. Sometimes, making a character that breaks those expectations can be really fun and create something truly unique. Like, picture a heavily armored halfling paladin, or a mountain dwarf who's a powerful wizard.
Yeah, I love that. It's like defying the stereotype.
Exactly. It shakes things up and gives you a fresh take on familiar characters.
So you mentioned that race also affects ability scores. Can you explain how that works?
Yeah, so your chosen race will actually give you boosts to specific ability scores.
Okay.
We'll dive into the specifics in Step 3. For now, just remember that those boosts are a direct result of your racial choice. Aside from ability scores, your race also determines the languages your character knows at the start, based on their background and their base speed, how fast they can move. You'll want to write all of these racial traits, the starting languages, and the speed down on your character sheet.
Got it.
Yeah.
So in Brunor's case, Bob's going for this, gruff mountain dwarf.
Yeah.
What did he decide for this first step?
Bob went with the mountain dwarf subrace for Brunor.
Okay.
Right off the bat, that gave Brunor a speed of 25 feet and the ability to speak common language, and dwarvish. Bob also made a note of all the other mountain dwarf traits because those will come into play later.
All right, so Brunor the mountain dwarf is starting to take form. What's the next big decision after choosing his race?
The next step is choosing Brunor's class. If race is like the foundation, the inborn traits, class defines what he does, his job, his special skills, and how he approaches adventures. In the basic rules, there's a whole section on classes that goes into detail about each one, like what makes the fighter different from a cleric, for example.
So class is basically what Brunor does in the world.
Exactly. Your class gives you a bunch of benefits, and the most important ones are class features.
Okay.
These are what make your character special. Like a fighter might have the ability to do these crazy combat moves, while a wizard can cast spells. You also get something called proficiencies based on your class.
Proficiencies, that's just stuff Brunor's good at, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's the things they're trained in. These proficiencies cover all sorts of areas. The armor and weapons they can use well, the skills they excel at, like intimidating someone or healing, the saving throws they're more resistant to, and sometimes even specific tools they know how to use. They really determine what your character can do effectively. And it's important to write down all the first-level class features you get right on your character sheet.
Okay, you mentioned starting at first level. What does that actually mean for Brunor's experience, in the world?
So usually, characters begin their adventures at first level. This basically means they're pretty new to this whole adventuring thing, although they might have some prior experience, like maybe they were a soldier, a blacksmith, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
As they go on adventures, they'll face challenges and gain what we call experience points, or XP. And as they get enough XP, they level up, meaning they become stronger and unlock new abilities. A first-level character always starts with 0 XP. And you should always write your current level and XP on your character sheet. Now, in certain cases, like if you're joining a game that's already started or if the Dungeon Master decides, you might start at a higher level.
Okay.
That implies that your character has already had some pretty serious adventures under their belt.
That makes sense. So you start with the basics and build up from there. Now, I saw something called quick build in the class descriptions. What's that all about?
The quick build sections are super helpful, especially if you're new to D&D or want to get a basic character up and running quickly. They suggest which ability scores are most important for that class, recommend a fitting background story, and even suggest some starting spells if your class uses magic. It's a great way to get a feel for a class and make those initial decisions without getting overwhelmed.
Very cool. Very helpful.
It streamlines the process. Now let's talk about hit points, or HP, and hit dice. These are really important for keeping Brunor alive,
I would think so, yeah.
Hit points show how tough your character is, how much damage they can take in a fight or other dangerous situations. And these are determined by your hit dice.
Okay.
At first level, every class has one hit die, and the type of die, like a G8, a D10, etc., depends on the class.
All right.
To figure out Brunor's starting hit points, you roll that die and add his Constitution modifier, which we'll get to in a bit.
Okay.
Whatever total you get is also his maximum hit points at first level. Make sure to write both his current and maximum hit points on the sheet, as well as the type and number of hit dice he has. And here's something important. After resting, Brunor can use these hit dice to regain lost hit points.
So I'm guessing tougher classes probably have a bigger hit die to roll?
Yeah, that's generally true. Classes that are all about being in the thick of combat and taking hits, like fighters and barbarians, they usually have larger hit dice.
Right.
So they start with more hit points and can heal more during rests.
Makes sense.
Now, there's also something called the proficiency bonus, which is separate from hit points.
Proficiency bonus, I've seen that term. What does it affect exactly?
The proficiency bonus is this bonus you add to a lot of different rolls you'll make in D&D.
Okay.
For a first-level character like Brunor, it's +2.
+2, okay.
You add this +2 to attack rolls with weapons they're proficient with, to spell attacks if they're a spellcaster, to ability checks when using skills or tools they're good at, to saving throws they're proficient in, and it even makes their spells harder for enemies to resist. Brunor's class will tell you his starting weapon and saving throw proficiencies, and it gives him some skill and sometimes tool proficiencies too. His background and race can give him even more proficiencies. It's super important to list all of Brunor's proficiencies and that +2 bonus on his character sheet. Just remember, you can never add your proficiency bonus more than once to the same roll.
Okay, so no double dipping. Got it.
Exactly.
So back to Brunor. Bob decided to make him a fighter.
Yeah.
What does this step look like for him in practice?
Well, Bob picked fighter for Brunor, picturing him as this strong warrior who likes direct combat. He wrote down all the fighter's starting proficiencies, things like being good with all types of armor and weapons, plus some specific saving throws. As a first-level fighter, Brunor has a D10 hit die, so his starting hit points will be 10 plus whatever his Constitution modifier turns out to be.
Uh-huh.
And, of course, Bob noted down that +2 proficiency bonus that all first-level characters get.
Okay, Brunor the Mountain Dwarf fighter is really coming together now. So now we need to figure out how strong he actually is, how smart he is, or maybe how not smart he is. And that's step 3, determining ability scores.
Right. Ability scores are the core of your character, like their raw potential. They represent 6 key abilities. Strength, which is all about physical power. Dexterity, which is agility, reflexes, balance. Constitution, which is health, stamina, toughness. Intelligence for thinking and knowledge. Wisdom for perception and insight. And charisma, which covers personality and leadership.
Okay, so that's like the whole range of what a person can be.
Exactly. Each of these abilities gets a score, a number that you write down, and these scores have a huge impact on practically everything your character does in the game. There's a section in the basic rules called Using Ability Scores that goes into detail about each ability and how it's used in the game. There's also a table called Ability Score Summary that's super useful. It tells you what each ability represents, which classes usually care about it the most, and which races get bonuses to that score.
That's helpful. So how do we actually figure out these scores for Brunor? Do we just pick whatever numbers sound good?
There are a couple of ways to do it. The first way is to roll dice, which adds some randomness. You roll 4 6-sided dice, drop the lowest one, and add up the other 3. Do that 6 times, and you have your 6 ability scores. The other way, which some people prefer because it's more balanced and predictable, is to use a standard array of scores. 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, and 8.
Okay.
You then assign those 6 numbers to your character's abilities based on what you want them to be good at and what's important for their class. For Brunor, who's a fighter, strength would be super important.
Makes sense.
After assigning the scores, you add any racial bonuses Brunor gets from being a mountain dwarf.
So those raw scores tell us how good Brunor is at those things, but the scores themselves can be a little hard to work with directly, right?
That's where ability modifiers come in.
Oh.
For each score, you calculate a modifier. To do that, you subtract 10 from the score and divide by 2, always rounding down. These modifiers are what you'll usually add to your rolls when you make ability checks, saving throws, and attack rolls. There's a handy table for this in the basic rules called Ability Scores and Modifiers.
So basically, the higher the score, the higher the modifier, and the better Brunor will be at things related to that ability.
Exactly.
Now, I also saw something called Variant, customizing ability scores. What's that about?
Oh yeah, that's called the point buy system. Instead of rolling or using the standard array, you get 27 points, and you use those points to buy your ability scores.
Interesting.
The cost for each score is listed in the ability score point cost table. This system gives you more control. You can decide to have a couple of really high scores and some lower ones, or go for a more balanced approach. Before racial bonuses, the highest you can buy with point buy is 15, and the lowest is 8. It's a good option if you want to really fine-tune your character's strengths and weaknesses.
It sounds like a way to get exactly what you want for your character. How did Bob decide on Brunor's ability scores?
Bob went with the standard array, 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, 8. Knowing that Brunor is a fighter, he put the highest score, 15, into strength. The next highest, 14, went to constitution, because dwarves are known for being tough.
Right.
Then he added Brunor's racial bonuses, +2 to constitution, and +2 to strength. So his final scores ended up being strength 17 with a +3 modifier, dexterity 10 with a +0 modifier, constitution 16 with a +3 modifier, intelligence 8 with a -1 modifier, wisdom 13 with a +1 modifier, and charisma 12 with a +1 modifier.
Okay.
And with that, Bob could finally calculate Brunor's starting hit points. He rolled a 10 on the D10 hit die and added his constitution modifier +3 for a total of 13 hit points.
All right. Brunor's stats are set. Now we're moving beyond just the numbers. We're getting into what makes him a unique individual. Yeah. His personality, his past. Step 4, describing your character. This is where we really get to use our imagination, right?
Totally. Now that we've got the mechanics down, it's time to breathe some life into Brunor. This means giving him a name, obviously, and thinking about how he looks. Is he tall for a dwarf? Short. Does he have any scars? A particular beard style? What's his personality like? Is he loud and cheerful or quiet and serious? There's a section in the rules called personality and background that can help with this. You'll also choose his alignment, which tells you about his moral compass. Is he good, evil, somewhere in between? And figure out his ideals, his beliefs, and motivations. Then you'll think about his bonds, the people or things he cares about most, and his flaws, his weaknesses that might get him in trouble.
Alignment, ideals, bonds, flaws. It's like we're building an actual person here, even if they're fictional.
Yeah.
And then there's the background. What is that all about?
So Brunor's background tells us his story, where he's from, what he did before becoming an adventurer, how he fits into the D&D world. The rules have a bunch of different backgrounds you can choose from, like soldier, noble, criminal, sage. Each one gives you different skills and a special background feature, which is basically a benefit or connection Brunor has because of his past. Your DM might even let you create a custom background if you have something specific in mind. And it's important to remember that Brunor's background will give him proficiency in 2 skills, and sometimes he might even learn extra languages or get proficiency with certain tools. You'll want to write down all this information, along with the personality details you come up with, on his character sheet.
It sounds like Brunor's personality and background should connect to his ability scores and his dwarven heritage.
Yeah. Ideally, yes. Think about how Brunor's high or low scores might show up in his personality and looks. A character with high strength but low intelligence might be strong but not very quick-witted, maybe a bit impulsive. On the other hand, a character with high intelligence but low strength might be frail but super smart, more into studying than fighting. Also think about how dwarven culture or their natural traits might shape Brunor's personality, his values, his view of the world.
Right, so the numbers should help inform the story we're telling about Brunor, and his story should give context to the numbers. What story is Bob crafting for Brunor in this step?
Okay, so Bob named him Brunor, decided he's male, and gave him a typical height and weight for a mountain dwarf. He chose lawful good for Brunor's alignment, meaning he's honorable and believes in justice.
Makes sense.
Since his strength and constitution are high, but his intelligence is low, Bob decided Brunor's pretty strong and tough, but maybe a bit forgetful or not, the sharpest tool in the shed. He chose the folk hero background for Brunor, imagining that he comes from a noble family but was exiled, and then became a famous blacksmith in a small village known for protecting the people there.
Cool.
This background gives him some useful skills and a special feature that reflects his heroic deeds. Bob also decided that even though Brunor's gruff on the outside, he actually cares deeply about his friends and is very loyal. His ideal is fairness. He wants to do what's right and treat everyone equally. His bond is a deep connection to his ancestral home, which he hopes to reclaim one day. And his flaw is that he's too trusting of people in need, which can sometimes get him into trouble.
Wow, Bob's really created a fleshed-out dwarf.
Okay, so now we've got a good sense of who Brunor is. What gear does he have to start his adventures with? That brings us to step 5. Choosing equipment. Right. Brunor's class and background will determine his starting equipment, which will usually include some weapons, armor, and adventuring gear.
Okay.
All this stuff is described in detail in the equipment section of the rules. Instead of just taking that preset equipment package, Bob can sometimes choose to buy Brunor's starting gear using a set amount of gold pieces, determined by his class. And you can find all the prices and item lists in that equipment section.
Oh, okay.
Bruno also gets to pick one trinket for free, which is like a small item that might be interesting but doesn't really do anything in the game. It's mostly for flavor.
So it's like he gets either a ready-made set of tools or some cash to go shopping.
Exactly. And when picking equipment, it's important to consider Brunor's carrying capacity. That's how much weight he can carry, and it depends on his strength score. You generally don't want him carrying more than 15 times his strength score in pounds. Then there's armor class, or AC, which basically tells you how hard it is to hit him in combat.
AC, the magic number that determines how good Brunor is at dodging blows.
Exactly. It's super important. Without any armor or a shield, Brunor's base AC would be 10 plus his dexterity modifier.
Yeah.
But most adventurers, especially fighters like Brunor, will wear armor and maybe carry a shield, and those things change their AC depending on the type.
Right.
The equipment section has all the details on how to calculate that. It's important to write down Brunor's AC on the character sheet. And also remember, he needs to be proficient with the armor and shield he uses to get their full benefit. If he wears armor he's not proficient with, it can cause problems.
Makes sense. You wouldn't want a clumsy dwarf in heavy armor.
Exactly. It wouldn't end well. And some spells and class features give you other ways to calculate AC. And if Brunor has multiple options, he can choose which one to use.
Okay, so lots of ways to protect yourself. Now, what about when Brunor is attacking? How do we figure out his attack rolls and how much damage he does?
Okay, so for each weapon Brunor might use, you need to figure out the modifier he adds to his attack roll and how much damage he does if he hits. When he makes an attack, he rolls a 20-sided die, a d20, and adds his proficiency bonus if he's good with that weapon, plus the right ability modifier.
Okay.
For melee weapons, like an axe, you usually use strength for both the attack and damage, unless the weapon has the finesse property, in which case you could use dexterity instead. For ranged weapons, you usually use dexterity for both the attack and damage. But some melee weapons, like a hand axe, have the thrown property, so you can use strength for those ranged attacks.
So it's d20 plus proficiency plus the right ability modifier to see if he hits, and then you roll for damage and add the same ability modifier again.
You got it.
How did Brunor equip himself? What did he choose?
Bob checked the starting equipment for a fighter with a folk hero background. He got chainmail and a shield, which give Brunor an AC of 18. That's pretty good protection.
Yeah.
He chose a battle axe and 2 hand axes as his weapons. The battle axe is a melee weapon, so his attack bonus is his strength modifier, which is +3, plus his proficiency bonus, +2, for a total of +5. If he hits, the battle axe does 108 slashing damage, plus his strength modifier, so 1d8 plus 3.
Right.
When he throws a hand axe, it's also treated as a melee weapon, so he gets the same +5 to hit. But the damage is a little different, 1d6 plus his strength modifier, for a total of 100d6 plus 3.
Got it. So, Brunor is fully equipped and ready for battle. Now, step 6 is coming together. What does this final step mean for Brunor?
Well, this step is all about remembering that D&D is a game you play with others. You're not alone.
Right.
Most D&D adventures involve a party, a group of adventurers who work together towards the same goal. Teamwork, communication, and cooperation are super important if you want to survive and succeed in D&D.
Right.
This is where you, as the player of Brunor, would talk to the other players and the DM about how your characters know each other, how they formed a group, and what kind of quests or adventures they might go on together. It's about creating those first connections and figuring out the dynamics of the party.
So even from the very beginning, we're not just thinking about Brunor's story, but how it fits with the stories of the other characters in the group.
Exactly. Your individual character concept is important, but it's the shared story, the interactions between characters, and the relationships that make D&D truly memorable.
Right. So now we've created Brunor at first level, but D&D characters don't stay the same forever, right?
Of course not.
That brings us to the section on Beyond First Level. What happens as Brunor goes on adventures and gains experience?
As Brunor faces challenges and accomplishes goals in his adventures, he'll earn experience points. When he gets enough XP, he gains a level, which makes him more powerful and versatile. Every time Brunor levels up, his fighter class will often give him new features, new abilities that make him even better at what he does.
Okay.
He might also have chances to increase his ability scores, usually by adding +2 to one score or +1 to two different scores. The maximum you can have in any ability score is 20. Plus, his proficiency bonus will go up at certain levels.
So he gets stronger and better at the things he's already good at.
Precisely.
Okay.
And each time he levels up, he also gets another hit die. He'll roll that d10, add his Constitution modifier, and add that amount to his maximum hit points, with a minimum increase of 1. And importantly, if his Constitution modifier ever goes up, his maximum hit points actually increase retroactively by 1 for each level he already has.
So leveling up basically makes him tougher, more skilled, and opens up new possibilities. I also saw something about tiers of play. What are those?
Tiers of play are basically a way of understanding how D&D changes as characters level up. The first tier, levels 1 to 4, is all about starting out. The characters are new adventurers, learning the ropes.
Right.
They're usually dealing with local problems, like goblins raiding a farm or something.
It's not small-scale stuff.
Exactly. Then there's the second tier, levels 5 to 10. This is where characters really start to shine. They get stronger, learn more powerful abilities like more powerful spells, or the ability to attack multiple times in combat. They might start facing threats to a whole town or region. The third tier, levels 11 to 16, is where they become seriously powerful. They can handle threats that could affect entire kingdoms or continents. Their magic and combat skills are super strong. And finally, there's the fourth tier, levels 17 to 20. This is like the peak of heroism or villainy if you're playing an evil character. Their actions can have huge consequences for the whole world.
So it's like a whole journey of growth and increasing stakes built right into the game.
Exactly. And the character advancement table in the rules shows you the XP you need for each level and how the proficiency bonus increases.
Very cool. So just to recap, when we're creating a D&D character like Brunor, we first imagine what kind of adventurer we want to play. Then we choose their race, which gives them their inborn traits.
Right.
Then we pick their class, which defines their skills and their role in the party. We figure out their abilities with ability scores, then flesh them out with a personality, a backstory, and some starting equipment. Finally, we connect with other players to form a party and start adventuring, with the potential to grow stronger and face bigger and bigger challenges. It seems like character creation is just the first step in a much bigger adventure.
Absolutely. And it's amazing how these early decisions, which seem simple at first, really lay the groundwork for your character's whole story.
Yeah.
It's the combination of the rules and mechanics, like the stats and abilities, and the creative stuff, like the personality and backstory that makes each D&D character unique and memorable.
So if you're listening to this and thinking about making your own D&D character, think about this. What kind of story do you want to tell? How will the choices you make now, like Brunor's dwarven race, his fighter class, the elements of his folk hero background, how will those things shape your character's story in unexpected ways?
Right.
Maybe try coming up with a character that combines things in an unusual way, like a really charismatic half-orc barbarian or a quiet and bookish gnome rogue. There are so many possibilities.